In this presidential election year, many of us are caught up in the drama of power, legitimacy, and the will of the people. That also goes for other countries. And in Russia, the greatest regime change drama is the opera Boris Godunov, based on the treatment by Alexander Pushkin. To tell us about the upcoming production by the Commonwealth Lyric Theater are its executive director, Olga Lisovskaya, and the conductor, Adrian Bryttan. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Olga, I'm sure you grew up with this opera, and why is this such a powerful thing that almost everybody in Russia would have connected with?
Well, actually, I never heard this opera before. I heard the excerpts, and it was not staple in Kiev.
In Ukraine.
In Ukraine. And when we started thinking, what are we going to do next after our production of Cossack Beyond the Danube last year, and then before we had Aleko by Rachmaninoff, and we did like smaller works, Aleko, Mozart and Salieri, and Cossack Beyond the Danube, and we decided to do Boris Godunov. And for me, at first, it was a shock that we would want to do that because it's such an epic work. But as soon as we started working on it, and we got our soloists, and we got our orchestra and chorus and children's chorus and wonderful conductor and international cast of soloists, we realized that that's exactly what we should be doing at this point in time. And we made our own version, Commonwealth Lyric Theater version, which portrays, which goes deeply into the conscience and the inner world of the Tsar Boris.
Adrian, talk about that, because Boris comes to power by supposedly killing the son who would have been the successor, that is the son of Ivan the Terrible. So he's got a problem.
Yes, it's a universal theme, and just a little sideline to what you said before, to what Olga said before, is that when I conducted in Ukraine, I spoke with some of the librarians in the opera houses, and they used to do Boris in the Ukrainian translation. So when they went on tour and they went to Moscow, they had to relearn it into the original Russian. I mean, that was the status of music in those days. But it is a universal theme. It's a psychological portrait that Mussorgsky was after. Boris Godunov is really a very unique, specific opera. There's nothing like it in the world of opera. Nothing similar to it in Puccini or Wagner or Verdi or any of the other great composers. It's very specific, and it's tied in to Mussorgsky's uncompromising vision of how the word reflects the emotions behind it, and then how that word gets set to music. So when people come to Boris Godunov for the first time, it might make a strange impression on you, because there are no set pieces. There are no set pieces like arias or duets or choruses that just go marching along and repeat the same kind of melody like the Soldiers' Chorus in Carmen or something like that. And even here the choruses are very asymmetrical. They're like somebody pops in a phrase here, another person reacts, but everything is based on the emotional content of the music. So in that sense, it's a completely specific, a completely unique work.
It's almost like the montage technique before Eisenstein came in. I mean, it's that kind of a progression.
Yes, and to go back to your question, why do Russians really love this work? It's actually because it is so closely related to the language, to the Russian language. That's why it's probably very difficult to do it in translation, because the way it's written is to show every little inflection of the speech. And even though Mussorgsky used some of the folk themes, of course he developed his own unique style, and so the music has become kind of foundation for many other composers to use some of his music later.
People don't realize that they think of Boris Godunov and they think of, this Tsar and he descends into madness and he kills children and all this kind of stuff. But there's also a lot of very funny scenes in the opera. And you mentioned about killing the Tsarevich. There's a gruesome moment when one other character is describing what happened years and years ago, before all this awful history starts to corrode Boris's mind, and he talks about there were 13 young children corpses lying there in a church, and the reason there were 13 because Boris wanted to make sure that he killed the Tsarevich, that there weren't any imposters. So that's a very spine-tingling moment in the opera at that point.
Olga, Pushkin really stirs the pot here because, in addition to Boris's ambitions, there is the ambition of the man who masquerades as the Tsarevich,
Yes.
Dmitri.
The imposter.
And there's Marina, who's also ambitious. There's lots of toxic stuff going on here.
Yes, so I just want to make sure that people know that we're doing the 1869 version. And by the way, there is many versions of Boris Godunov. And the very first version that Mussorgsky wrote, there was no Act 3. The Act 3 that we know now as Act 3, the Polish Act with Marina Mniszek. And there was no act in his original version. So we're not doing the version where there's this beautiful scene with Grigori or false Dmitri and prima donna, mezzo-soprano prima donna Marina Mniszek. But so we have a much more compact opera that concentrates on the portrait of the Tsar.
And Adrian, of course, you have that great depiction of speaking truth to power and the speaking from a holy fool.
Oh yes, this I think was a. I don't think that that's in the original Pushkin version. I've read through the play and I've jotted down. I think there were only like about 5 or 6 scenes that Mussorgsky used from that. Then later he added his own ideas, and number one was to introduce a kind of like a not vulgar but a very rustic humorous element with the 2 drunken friars and the whole innkeeper scene, which is a riot. I mean, if people follow it word by word, I mean, it's really very funny and very subtle humor. I mean, it's not just rough
We will
humor,
have
it's
super
very-
titles so people will understand
Oh,
what we're
that's-
talking about.
With the Holy Fool, that was I think Mussorgsky's stroke of genius to
agree.
think up a scene like that. The Holy Fool speaks like. Well, like in Shakespeare's plays, the fool is wiser than just being a fool. The fool actually says things that the ruler wants to hear, sometimes doesn't want to hear, makes him angry, but he speaks the truth.
He's the
and in this way,
prophet.
the prophet. And in this opera, the fool speaks in symbols. He speaks of a Russia, he speaks of a moon, he speaks of these crazy things like, you know, the kitten is crying, the moon is up there in the sky, and Russia is dying. Russia is like suffering before
Flow,
their eyes.
bitter tears.
Yeah.
And that's how the opera ends, is with Holy Fool's very sad depiction of Russia's future.
We should mention the performances taking place when and where?
We are opening tomorrow, May 20th, in Opera Garden, which is in Newton, 381 Dudley Street. And we will run May 20th, 21st. Those are 2 performances outdoor. And May 24th and 26th at Newton City Hall in Newton. And we are part of the Newton Arts Festival.